today's event, Liberty Amendments Month, today we're celebrating Liberty Amendments Month. It's a celebration of the 13th, 14th, and 19th Amendments. This week at this event, we honor the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Linda Colbert. Please put your hands together and thank her. It's a little easier.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome, and I'm so glad to see so many beautiful women and some men. I see some men here, too. And I'm going to thank the Vienna Business Association again and Peggy James, the Liberty Amendments Committee. They do so much, and especially the people who did put on tonight, and Lily Widman, and thank you, Peggy, for mentioning her. So they've done so much. So we're here celebrating the 19th Amendment. It's only been over 100 years, just a little bit over 100 years that women have been voting in America, which is always just kind of blows my mind. And we, in Vienna, we have really a long history of women leaders in our town. It goes back, and I'm not going to mention them all, but Martha Jo Garvey, Maud Robinson, Lori Cole, Carrie Sinecki, Tara Block, Nisha Patel, and the past 3 mayors have all been female. My mother was the first female mayor, and when she was elected, you know, they made a big deal about that, and she was kind of like, oh, yeah, okay, you know, which I thought was really kind of neat that she was proud to be mayor, but it was just like, well, yeah, I'm a woman and I can be mayor. And then Lori Duraco and then myself. And before I go further, I did want to mention we have a council member here tonight. Councilmember Chuck Anderson is here. Supervisor Dahlia Palchik. Town Manager Mercury Payton. And I don't think council members Ed Summers and Nisha Patel, they were going to be here, but I don't think they are here. Okay. But I'm very proud of the leadership, the women leadership in our town. We also have on our towns and commissions, we have 4 chairs of our commissions are female. 6 of the directors in the town are female. That's over half of our directors. And one is right back there. Natalie Moncow is back here. She's one of our female directors. In town, of course, we have the director of our business association, Peggy James, Ann Stuntz from Historic Vienna, both very active, very rich, and we love these organizations, and they do so much for our town. Optimist and Rotary clubs, and Rotary used to not even allow women, but we have had women. We've had women leaders in both of those organizations. Madison High School, Liz Calvert, she is the new principal there, and our superintendent of Fairfax County Public Schools is a female, and that's Michelle Reed. Of course, we also have Vienna businesses that are led and owned by women. But I don't think it's just those women, of course, that we need to celebrate. I think we need to celebrate women in every role. And that is what I think is so important, is that women can be whoever they want to be. They can be stay-at-home moms. They can be working moms. They can be single. They don't have to get married. Whatever they do, I think that's what we need to be celebrating, is whatever role they choose to do is fine. They can wear dresses, they can wear pants, they can, wear whatever they want. And that is what we need to be celebrating and supporting. And that's I think, really important. My notes here, sorry, I'm looking on the wrong one. 1 second, okay. So, did anyone see the Dolly Parton documentary? There's a Dolly Parton documentary on Netflix. I'm a huge Dolly Parton fan, and whether you are a fan of hers or not, I love her music, but I also really admire her. And why do I admire her? Well, she is a strong woman, and she is unapologetic of who she is. She does her thing. And some of the quotes that she said that I just jotted down, she said, it never crossed my mind. She was talking about how she got to where she was and when she was trying to make it in the music industry. She said, it never crossed my mind that I couldn't do it. She said, because I was a woman, I wasn't afraid. I will either succeed or I will fail. Well, failing's not so bad. You're not going to, it happens, right? We all try things and we're going to succeed or fail. She was just someone who said, a lot of things that inspired me, and she gives back to the community too. You know, she has the reading. I can't think of the name of it right now, but she gives a lot of money to her reading organization, to the nonprofit. Another thing that really impresses me about her, she dresses a certain way. Of course, her hair, she has wigs. Some people like that, some people don't. But she does it, and she did it, I think, at first to get attention. But she said, she was asked, and I was watching this interview back with Barbara Walters, and she said, you know, what do you think about people making fun of you? And she said, the joke's not on me, it's on them. She said, I know exactly what I'm doing, and I can change it at any time. I know, right? Exactly. So good for her, right? You may like it, you may not, but she's doing what she's doing, and she's unapologetic for it. So what does it mean to be an empowered woman? I know that's what the panel is going to be talking about tonight. For me, what an empowered woman is, it's someone who's confident, someone who's educated, and educated, not necessarily school educated, but just staying on top of the issues, kind of, you know, being aware of what's going on in your community so you can get out there and vote, or if you want, or make a comment at a public hearing, or whatever it is you want to do, just kind of being aware of what's going on, having role models. I saw some of the comments that were written on the note cards over there. I thought that was really neat. One of my role models is my mother. And when I told her I was thinking about running for town council, I was like, you know, I just don't know if I can do that. She looked at me, she was like, if I can do it, you can do it. I mean, just like, of course you can. And that just gave me so much confidence. And so I just wanted to share that with you. There's so many other things I love about her, but that was just one of the things. I think being healthy and being fit, because of course we have our self-worth, keeping a positive attitude, and having a support group. Hopefully our family supports us, our friends, making friends that support you is very important, but also supporting each other. I think as women, we have to support each other. And we don't have to support just women that we agree with. I think it's really important to support each other and listen to each other so that women feel empowered to speak and to express themselves, and to stick up for them when they do want to be heard. I think that's very important. So I just want to end with another Dolly Parton quote, and that is, women should be able to do anything they want to do. So I think there we go. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Thank you. It's always an honor, always a privilege to be asked to speak. I don't take this for granted. I really don't. I really find that this is just amazing that all of you are here and you're listening to what I have to say, and I'm very honored to be able to do this. And if I'm going to have to leave early, but it's because we have a meeting, and so I'm going to jog over to Town Hall here pretty soon, but it's not because I am not interested in everything you have to say. So with that, I think, who am I passing this on to? Back to Lily?
Over to Eve.
Okay, and here's Eve.
So thank you, Mayor Colbert, for sharing those inspiring words, and thank you all for joining us here this afternoon. It really is a pleasure for me to be here. I have the honored role of introducing our panelists today, and we really have a fantastic panel of women who are going to talk to us about empowering women. And I'd also like to say I'm really excited to be a part of this Liberty Amendments Month program. I participated in one of the programs last year, and so I'm really honored to be able to do it again this year in honor of the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, and also the Voting Rights Act, which was passed in 1965, which extended that right to vote to Black women and other women of color. And so I'm really pleased to be able to honor those two amazing pieces of legislation that really sought to empower women and give us the ability to be here today and to have a mayor and all of these wonderful things that we're celebrating. So thank you all. So our panelists, as I mentioned, we have an amazing panel. First, we have Michelle Connors, and she is the founder and executive director of Rustic Love. Thank you. So Michelle founded Rustic Love with her family in the spring of 2020. And this was stemming from her family's wish to help area restaurants stay in business and help feed local food insecure families at the start of the pandemic. And Rustic Love has grown into a nonprofit that has more than $400,000 in the first 3 years. So that's incredible. And for her work with Rustic Love, Michelle was awarded the Vienna Mayor's Award in 2021. Michelle has been in travel and media marketing for 27 years and has been a Northern Virginia resident for more than 20 years. Next up, we have Dahlia Palchik. Supervisor Dahlia Palchik was born in Argentina and moved to Fairfax County when she was 6 years old. She currently represents the Providence District of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors and currently serves as the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee, the chair of the Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, and on the State Executive Council for Children's Services. We have Anusce Sanai, and Anusce joined the Tahirih Justice Center in 2012. She is a dedicated and experienced attorney with 10 years of direct legal services and management work in the immigration nonprofit field. She continues to strive for the advancement of equal rights, social justice, and race unity while working with survivors of gender-based violence. Anusce's journey at Tahirih began as a family law attorney, expanding into immigration law while ascending to the role of supervisor and to her current position as senior managing attorney. She is also the co-chair of Tahirih's Gender, Race, Anti-Racism, Cultural Humility, and Equity Task Force. And finally, we have Sovaida Ewing, and she is a prolific author, speaker, life mastery coach, and international lawyer with more than 20 years of experience in public and private legal practice. She is the founding director of the Center for Peace and Global Governance, which is a virtual think tank and an online forum that pools and proposes principled solutions to pressing global challenges. She has published 5 books in the area of peace and global governance, including Building a World Federation, The Key to Resolving Our Global Crisis, and The Alchemy of Peace, 6 Essential Shifts in Mindsets and Habits to Achieve World Peace. She also hosts a video podcast called Reimagining Our World, which is dedicated to creating the vision of the world that we want. And with that, I will turn it over to our panelist. And Michelle, do you want to kick things off?
I'm going to wander a little bit. Thank you so much for having me. This is an honor. As you just heard all the introductions, I'm in amazing company and very honored to be here, so thank you so much. And thank you to the Vienna Baha'i Faith Community for sponsoring this event, and the Historic Vienna, and Peggy from the VBA who invited me to speak today. So I wanted to start off with a picture of kind of who we are. Hopefully a lot of you are in Vienna and already know who Rustic Love is, and this is a visual representation of what we are. We take this picture, we call it the quilt. We take it at the end of every build that we have to kind of showcase the colorful contribution from our volunteers and representing the open heart logo that we have and the love we have for our community. So happy 103rd birthday to the 19th Amendment. We're all about girl power in my house. I have 3 daughters. One of them is here today. They are wonderful, hardworking, very intelligent and kind young women, and I know that we are very blessed to live in this country at this time. For them to have all of the opportunities that they have, 2 of them are going to college in the fall and are poised to be super successful, and I'm very, very proud of them and proud that we have the ability to do everything that we can, and they can seize the day when they go to school. When my oldest daughter, who's here today, was 1 year old, we decided to expand our family and adopt, and we settled on the country of China. And the way we came to that conclusion was because at that time there was a one-child policy, which meant that a lot of infant girls were abandoned simply because of their gender. And after having this wonderful, year-old baby that was amazing and had so much potential, it was kind of inconceivable to me that all of these babies were abandoned simply because of their gender. So we started our journey to adopt, and 4 years later, this is who we adopted. A little different than the infant girl from China. We ended up pivoting for a number of reasons, mostly of which, the biggest reason was the program in China got a little crazy. We were actually still on the list. This was 17 years ago when we started our journey, so we ended up changing and going from one side of the world to the other, adopting an almost 6-year-old boy. And the heading of my slide here is Girl Power China and the Marginalization of Women. They all kind of seem like strange. How do those fit together? They fit together in our family. We went from China, where girls were abandoned due to their gender, over to Ethiopia, where we ended up adopting the boy from a woman who was from a she was marginalized in her society and was unable to take care of her children. She had no education, she had no way to make money, and she had to make the terrible choice to give up her child. So the fact that we kind of were affected just because of gender and how we ended up expanding our family is pretty significant and plays into how Rustic Love was even founded. So I kind of wanted to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about some of the numbers because it's important and plays into the story as well. So according to the USDA, food insecurity is defined as a lack of consistent access to enough food for an active, healthy life. Makes sense, right? In the US, women are 35% more likely to experience poverty than men, with single mothers facing the highest risk. Also, not a big surprise. The prevalence of food insecurity among Fairfax County households with children is 41%. This is from the Capital Area Food Bank's 2022 Hunger Report. That seems like a really strange statistic when you think about how rich this county is, but it's a fact. There's been a disproportionate impact of the pandemic on certain populations. You can probably guess who they are. People in communities of color, low-wage earners, women, households with children. And more than men, women face multiple role conflict. What does that mean? That means that women are primarily the caregivers for children and run households in addition to having full-time jobs. And being able to balance those two things is really, really tricky. So they face a lot of conflict in how they perform at work, what opportunities they can take advantage of when they have to actually go home and do most of the caretaking of their children, et cetera. So what does that have to do with Rustic Love? There's a lot about me. There's some statistics. Well, today what we're supposed to be talking about is the impact on and the empowerment of women, and it all ties together. So Rustic Love was founded in 2020, as was mentioned earlier, by Eve, by me and my family, and it was inspired by a woman. She was leading a movement in town via the Vienna VA foodies, whom a lot of you probably have heard of. And what she did was she took her restaurant review Facebook page and turned it into a fundraiser and was helping out restaurants who were struggling in the pandemic. And I'm going to throw her picture up because it's a cute picture. Lydia Russo. And we wanted to participate. And I was furloughed from my job. I worked in the student travel industry. Clearly that was going nowhere in 2020. And we wanted to participate, but didn't have the money, the discretionary funds to do so. So following Lydia's lead, we decided to come up with a fundraiser, and that's how Rustic Love was born. Due to the success of what we were doing and the support of our amazing, amazing community, we ended up becoming a 501c3 and have earned $400,000 in the last 3 years. Completely outrageous and unexpected. We have an all wonderful female board of directors, one of whom is here today, Claudia, hello. And each month we work on, who are we gonna donate to? What kind of new products can we come up with? What new sales are we gonna have? And, just trying to kind of prioritize what's important about trying to make our organization grow. As far as our volunteers go, also female-led. We have about 80% of the people that volunteer with us are women, and they're wonderful groups of girls, Girl Scouts, women working with their teenage sons, women working with their teenage daughters, families, single women, women who own businesses, bringing their clients, volunteer superstars in our community, girls working on their bat mitzvahs projects, teenagers like my cute teenager who volunteered all the time. It's heavily women driven, which is extremely important for me. Also, we have a lot of female-led business partnerships. The really interesting thing about that is the majority of the business partnerships that we have different merchandise where they donate part of the proceeds of what they sell back to us, came to us wanting to work with us, to donate, to be involved with our mission. And that's really rewarding that they were female-led. I wonder why that is. It's because women rock. Jen from Caboose Brewing, Denise from Social Burker, our amazing mayor, and Peggy James, who are our biggest cheerleaders in town, constantly working with us. Christy from Mud Tree Designs. A lot of these ladies are here today. Marl from Achiki and Goldsmiths. We have great little cute gold and silver charms, FYI. Susan, who's also here today. I saw you in the back, Susan. Who works with us on a candle that we have at the Freeman store, a lovely resource in town. And then, of course, what's most important for us is our community recipients. Women are primary agents of change in the community, primary agents of change. How do I know that? Every time we go and we donate to an organization, it is women, women, women. It is teachers, it is administrators, it is nonprofit leaders, it is volunteers. Women, 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 primary agents of change. So again, we're talking about empowerment and impact today. How does Rustic Love fit into that? We empower kids in our community to recognize global problems that also exist in their own community. Use philanthropy and volunteerism to make a positive change in the community that they live in. And hopefully plant the seeds for them to continue doing that when they become adults. It's important. We also empower businesses to make contributions to their community. Having businesses in our town is obviously awesome, and we love restaurants and shops and everything else, but to empower them to become involved with mission and help feed people that live in their community outside of the things that they sell is a great opportunity, and we love partnering with them. We also, obviously the most important, empowering recipients to reduce the stress of finding their next meal and focus on success in school and elsewhere in their lives. Going back to what I was talking about earlier with my son, one thing I talk about all the time with food insecurity is people do not become secure once they get their meal. That's not how it works. If you're food insecure, those problems can last a lifetime. I adopted someone who was 6 years old. He's 18 now. The problems still exist. It's more than just the hunger getting satisfied. There's mental aspects to it. There's long-term physical aspects in the back of your brain that you don't even know about. It affects how you make decisions. It's a big deal. So if you can empower people and give them the food, then they can be more successful in school, in their jobs, their bodies are healthier. It's important. And as far as the impact, we help provide basic nutrition for women, children, and families in our community. And I actually made sure that I wrote in the next part here on the slide because it's important. The significance of this cannot be overstated. The significance of providing basic nutrition for people in our community cannot be overstated. Food insecurity can have impacts that include reduced productivity, poorer health, and lower educational performance. These are facts. These happen with children who go to our schools, children who play on sports teams that our children play against, our neighbors, people who come into our stores. It's all around us. The statistics in the earlier slide show that. It's incredible. And really, I can wrap it up and say food is one of the 4 basic human needs. Food, air, water, and shelter. They're so basic. Of course, everyone should have shelter. Air, hello. Water, food, it's so important, so basic. And if we can do things as a community and empower people to work with us, empower businesses, empower children to volunteer with us, and try to make a difference in our community, we can do such great things. And that's all I had.
Well, very hard to follow that. I don't have a presentation, but happy to chat a little bit. Dahlia Palchik, so as was shared a little bit before, I represent the Providence District, which those who are not aware, and many of us do not know, Providence was actually the original name of Fairfax, was the town of Providence, where we now have the judicial complex. So a lot of history here in Fairfax County, and I'm sitting here thinking about all the ways that are so similar, but also different in how I came about to what I'm doing today. So, as was mentioned, I was born in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, granddaughter and great-granddaughter of immigrants escaping Eastern Europe, going to Argentina. And then my parents lived through military dictatorship. My uncle had to escape pretty quickly, moved here to Maryland and then Virginia. And after the 1990s, I still remember this day. I didn't realize it was the same day. My mom found out she was pregnant with my little sister. But it also was the same day my dad was kidnapped for the day for ransom from someone who knew he was going to pay all of his employees. My dad was an architect. And so my parents said enough is enough. And my dad came a couple times, found a job here with an architecture firm the second time. And the rest is history. Well, actually, the rest is not history. It was pretty precarious for a long time. My dad made $20,000 a year. My mom didn't speak English, couldn't drive, hadn't worked outside the home, and was now in charge of the 4 kids. And it was a really hard time. But we were pretty fortunate. Argentina was, I believe, still the only Latin American country, you probably know better than I do, that is eligible for the visa lottery. So we applied that first year. My mom stood for a week outside the Merrifield post office, where I now have my campaign mailbox. It was almost trampled. And we were very, very fortunate to be able to have receive the visa through the lottery that one year, which many, many families do not. So though we grew up in poverty, I was very fortunate and learning English here that my mom didn't finish college, so wanted to make sure I did, but very well educated and were able to create their own businesses. My mom went to Nova to learn English. She was a little bored with language. My dad and I love languages. And her counselor said, well, what do you love to do? She said, I love to cook. And so she went into the catering program and started her own small catering business here in Northern Virginia. So she is definitely one of my role models. And my dad, who I never imagined I would be doing what is called urban planning, had degrees both in architecture and back in the day, he couldn't work in it, but in urban planning. He had gone to Switzerland for 6 months, because he and I love languages, and helped design the walking trails that they have in Zurich. And so definitely love that, love what my mom did. I had no idea what I wanted to do, but I knew I cared. And I knew I grew up here in Fairfax County, back in the day where we weren't necessarily celebrating our diversity, our diverse cultures, our languages. I was very ashamed to go to school. I'm ashamed to say now, and tried to hide my parents and their accents and their ways of not understanding how school functioned. But coming out of school, graduating here from Fairfax County Schools, I knew I wanted to do and serve, and I didn't know how. So I actually thought I would do international work. I worked in microfinance back right after college, and I loved the work. I had an opportunity to work with Muhammad Yunus, who's one of my heroes in the world of microfinance. And I actually was communications director for a small nonprofit that did global work when he won the Nobel Peace Prize. I said, this is amazing, but oh my gosh, I am not mature enough to figure out what I'm doing here. So I taught for many years, and I think as was mentioned, I knew I grew up in poverty, but Fairfax County, I said, well, there's not the extreme poverty that we're seeing in some of these parts of the world where women were getting loans to help educate their children, to run businesses. And I still remember visiting some of those businesses and seeing what the women were doing, collaborating in groups. They would take out loans and repay the loans. And every single woman, I interviewed some 50 business owners my first time in Togo in West Africa. And every single one of them, when I asked them, what are your dreams and your hopes? They would say to me, to build a home for my children, because they either had the woman's home or the father's home, to have a home for them to go to school and to have a future that I didn't have. Every single woman I talked to, after asking very kind of day-to-day questions, dreams and hopes were about the next generation and their kids. But what I was doing, and what everyone here does, is community work. everything we did, from the way the women worked together, and the majority were women, they would ask for maybe $100 in a loan, and they would work really hard to repay it. I went to visit some of the men's groups. They asked for $3,000 loans, and they were playing cards. So it became pretty clear that it was a really important model. A lot of changes have occurred in it, but that, as was said, empowering women, which is what we're talking about today, and ensuring that they have access, we knew, and the statistics showed that they were going to put the majority of everything they received back into their community, into their kids, and ensuring that they were investing in that. Some of these groups then went from, that have now become some of the largest NGOs in the world, Grameen, BRAC, they are everywhere. And they started in places where governments weren't doing that function. They went from doing what was needed in the community, listening, loans. They may have started with loans. They may have started with health education. That was one of my favorite parts. You had loan officers who were already trusted by their community, and I think that was a big, big piece. The trust is the hardest part of what we do. They built that trust, and they didn't have to be doctors or health experts, but they were able to have, we had training of trainers. They went out to that same group of women, and for a very low cost of training a loan officer, they were able to bring health education classes and empower the women and the groups with education, with things that help them better do their work. So whether it was health, whether it was finance, whether it was support for their children, building schools. And one of the largest NGOs that had started working in the second largest slum outside of Nairobi, they realized they were doing all of these great things. Their women had all the support, but they didn't have a place to live. So that community, that NGO, the nonprofit, went out and they said, let's find land. And kind of like when we say, hey, let's just build something, it's easy, right? The engineering part might be easy, but the political will and the power, all they kept hearing was, no, 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 not in our neighborhood, not here. No, we don't want those communities here. We don't want those families here. Go out there and do it. So eventually they found land and they were able to build, train their workforce to build their own homes, to build the bricks, to build the homes, to have sewage systems, and to build that community that they knew these women needed, worked hard for, and wanted their kids to have for generations to come. So I never imagined doing this work locally. I never imagined running for office. At the time, there was no one who looked like me. I believe in the first Latina on the board. I don't know if there's been another immigrant on the board. But certainly, for me, it was not about that. It was really about the fact that there were changes and needs in our community that needed to be addressed. And the biggest part being, and my favorite quote is, women belong in all places where decisions are being made. Is that we can do some things around the corner, we can talk about things, but unless you have a seat at that table, and unless you're working hard to ensure that those women who are working 3 jobs in order to be able to stay where they are, have that opportunity, they know, and we know that they're spending most of their time working, supporting their kids, and educating them, and ensuring everything they can. But if you're working 3 jobs just to afford to live in that community so that you don't have to move your child to a different school, so that you don't have to leave that community, it's a huge challenge. And to me, it was so important. I loved the work I was doing, and I think there's so much that we all do. And finding that role, and where that is, and the problems that you want to solve every day. So for me, when I finally decided to run for office, it took me about a year thinking about, and I ran for school board first. I was a teacher. I said, okay, maybe I'll do this. But there's so many capable people, and the school board had a lot of women on it. But I used to take the bus from my old apartment next to the Fairfax Hospital up to Dunloring to go to work in DC. And I remember I would just take the Fairfax Connector bus every day, mostly Latina women, some men on there talking, and it was December. And 2 of them were in front of me, and I was eavesdropping, and they were saying to each other in Spanish, oh, ¿qué tal? How's it going? The holiday's good. Did you get your 50-cent raise? Yes, I did. And you? Yes, 50 cents. She said, well, but at least you have your 2-week vacation and you can take some time off. And most of these women were coming from southern part of the county in Springfield, going up to work in hotels in Tyson's. And she said, yes, well, I would, but I have my part-time job, so I can't. And I've been thinking of moving apartments so I don't have to have that second job. But my son is so happy at his school, and I don't want to move him. And that was the moment when my heart sank, and I said, I'm not running for them. For me, I'm running for them. And everyone deserves to have a voice on that board and in that leadership. And yes, there's so many ways that I can be involved, but this seems to be a way that I can bring that. And so every day from ensuring, I love that we're talking more and more, especially after the pandemic, we couldn't hide. We knew, we saw in the schools, if Fairfax County's population of students on free meals were set aside as an entire school system, it would be the second largest school system in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We have such great need as well as such great wealth and opportunity here in the county. And it's important that we work every single day to ensure that we continue to be this welcoming and safe community, this inviting community, and this, for me, it's the community of opportunity. And so removing barriers to opportunity, ensuring that women, and especially their kids, and I have a almost 1.5-year-old at home, who I get to be here because she's with Daddy tonight, that it's not just about being able to scrape by and maybe hopefully afford to live here, but that they're able to fulfill their dreams and their kids' dreams and wishes, and that they are able to be productive, they're able to be the future leaders in our community. And that it's about more of us and more voices and hearing more of those voices, and they don't come to you. You have to go to them. And I'll just close with one of my biggest mentors who I hadn't thought about in a while until now, Mohammed Yunus. And he used to always say, you know, his first loan was $27 that he gave. And he said, you know, he left the campus, he was an economics professor, he went out to the community, he was trying to understand a little bit why he was here working in this large university and there was so much poverty around him. And he went to understand that financially, they didn't need very much to be able to do the things they were hoping to do, to get by to the end of the month, to build some businesses. And he said, I went to the women, and the first women who I offered the loan to, and they said, yes, I want the loan. He said, no, those aren't the ones. Then he kept going. He said, the next group of women, I offered the loan, and they said, well, okay, maybe. Will you help me? And he said, those weren't the ones I was targeting. He said it was the last group of women who he went to them, and he offered the loan, and they said, I'm not even worthy. Why would you even give me a loan? And he said, those are the women I needed to support. So to me, this is our community. Fairfax County is larger than 8 states and the District of Columbia. And Vienna is a wonderful town. And for me, it's important to be able to bring that sense of community and belonging and respect and inclusion into everything we do across such a large county. And to me, that's the biggest part. And I think women are the best at it. And so everything we do, everything we connect to, it really is, we do so much well, but who are we not listening to? Who are we not reaching out to? And whose stories have we not heard yet to ensure that they're included and that those barriers are taken down so they and their kids have opportunity? So I'm very, very honored to be here. Thank you all. This is not my district, so thank you for inviting me over to Vienna. Though many of you here are also Merrifield bound and tied, and so really, really appreciate this work. And to me, the last thing is I was very saddened when we're a board of 10. Only 2 women are running for re-election on our board next year, and I found that very sad. So I started a small group of women across sector because I said, not all of us know politics, why would you do that? But it's about women in leadership and support. And so please consider getting involved, whether it's for your local board and commission on the town, on the Hunter Mill. Walter Alcorn can appoint women. Please get involved. There are so many ways to share your voice and your experience and give a little bit of time, a lot of time if you have it, but just a little bit of time because your perspective is truly important. So thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm very excited, and I'm hoping that in this 15 minutes, I'll be able to give you the nuggets that I'm hoping to give you. My name is Anusce Sanai, and my pronouns are she and her. I am the senior managing attorney of the Tahirih Justice Center, which is a national nonprofit organization whose mission is to serve women and girls and anyone else who identifies as a survivor of gender-based violence. We have 5 different locations nationwide with 2 brick and mortars in Falls Church and Baltimore, and I serve as the managing attorney of the region. So today I'm hoping to challenge you a little bit and challenge your notion of empowerment to see whether we can shy away from what empowerment may be defined based on what you think it is and based on what society may tell us it is, and shy away from looking at it through the lens of the privileged, through the lens of the system that continues to empower those who have privilege. And so to look at it not necessarily as something that is connected to how well educated you may be, or how well-rounded you may be, or how much you may have traveled, or whether you have confidence, or whether you are well-spoken, and so forth. So as you keep these notions in mind, I hope that it will give you a little bit of pause to see exactly what does empowerment actually means. And so I have my phone in hand just because I have some talking points. I promise is not an indication of distraction. I'm not waiting for a call. But I wanted to also share with you that the center of the mission of the Tahirih Justice Center is unity. Why unity? Because the Tahirih Justice Center is inspired by the spiritual principles of the Baha'i faith. It is not a religious-based organization, but it draws its mission and it centers its mission on topics such as unity and equality of men and women. And so it is through that centeredness that then we infuse the work, and we try to really work towards the bringing together the genders so that we can advance the equality. And so how do we do that? We do it in a variety of ways. In my particular role, I do it with direct services, so the legal field. I practice immigration, I manage the legal team, but it is not just a matter of legal representation. We pride ourselves because we are holistic in approach and interdisciplinary in approach. So what does that mean? That means that when a person needs our services, we don't act immediately for the purpose of providing legal advice and making sure that we take their case and we represent them, whether it's in court or with another agency. We immediately partner with our social services department. And we rally around the person and we create almost like a little team of advocates. And we ensure that the person finds their agency first. And what is agency if not that their voice? Because it has been quieted. Oftentimes they've been deprived by their voice and they haven't really been able to even make the simplest of decisions. And they may be in situations like the one we've heard from the prior panelists in terms of food insecurities or housing issues. And so you cannot talk about legal needs until you have reached a place of safety. So safety planning is the number one priority when somebody walks through our door. So you may wonder who walks through our doors. Surprisingly, every time I present about the work, oftentimes when talking about immigration, the first word that comes to mind is refugees. But I can assure you, we don't work with refugees. Refugees is a legal term, and usually you're deemed a refugee outside the United States when working with international organizations that are helping you to move away from a situation of war and you've already been given permission to come to the United States, and you're waiting to arrive. Once you arrive, you're given papers, and you're helped to establish your life. Our clients, most of our clients, are immigrant survivors who are already here in the United States. And the number one reason why they come through our door is because they suffered a crime. And that crime is based on their gender. And do you know where the crime may have happened? On American soil. So most of the time, we think that the immigrants are coming from their home country because they've suffered something in their home country. Yes, that's true. That's the basis for asylum. But the majority, 80% of survivors of gender-based crimes have suffered the crime here in the United States. And so Congress has created pathways for these individuals to be able to file their paperwork and obtain papers because they collaborate with law enforcement, they help detect the crime, and they're able then to have that pathway towards their green card. One of the sensationalized remedies that I work with every single month, pretty much, is what now has become a very popular show. You know, the 90-Day Fiancé show? Yes. Okay. So that's another remedy that we deal with. It's under the Violence Against Women Act. And under that particular act, if you're an immigrant who falls in love with a United States citizen and wants to get married, guess what? It is the United States citizen that becomes your sponsor, and the entire process is in the hands of the United States citizen. So what happens if, after the honeymoon period and after a lot of happiness, violence happens? What happens if you find yourself in an abusive situation? Are you to go back home? No. So Congress recognized that and said that in order for someone who finds themselves in that situation, there's a pathway to file for your safety, a pathway towards your green card without your sponsoring partner knowing, and also without the need for your sponsoring partner to be at all involved in the process. And that's, you may have heard of VAWA. That's a VAWA petition. Here in Northern Virginia, unfortunately, we have a bit of a hub of trafficking. That is another remedy that we deal and we handle. Particularly, sex trafficking is very high in Northern Virginia. We're a bit of a clearinghouse where everybody arrives and then they move them. So these are just some of the examples of the remedies, but let me come back to how do we empower? And so in the moment that a client arrives through our door and is equipped with a team that rallies around them, we become, the client takes the driver's seat, and we become basically the passenger of that car. And we guide the car by saying, no, not this way, you should consider going this way, by informing the person of all the different consequences or better or advantages and so forth if they were to go the other way. Every single decision is made in unison with the person. Every single decision is led by the person, and we don't step in. We don't try to persuade them in one way or another, which is the hardest job ever. Because statistically, a woman goes back to the abusive situations how many times? Do you all know? Ooh, yes. Who said it? Yes. Are you an advocate? Oh, 7. You're absolutely right. 7 times. And so that is statistically. And so when we speak about empowerment, right, this person who is returning to an abusive situation, does it look less empowered because they're choosing to go back? No. What if they don't have education? Are they less empowered? No. What if they don't speak English? Are they less empowered? No. So empowerment is a very personal agency. Empowerment is a very personal design based on the circumstances and the decisions of the person, and mainly is rooted in the respect that we carry for one another. As my empowerment may look very different from anybody else's empowerment, but is definitely not less or more. And so as we approach our clients, we have to be mindful of our own biases, we have to be mindful of our own privileges, we have to be mindful of our own prejudices so that we can dismantle the oppressive systems that they find themselves in. Because the immigration system, whether within the immigration courts or the agency, is built to keep people out. It is a filtering system that only allows those that may look like those in power to come through. And so it's designed to keep people out, which is contrary to the original design of the immigration system, which was built on the backs of freed slaves when there was the emancipation, when America fought for liberty and justice. It was because of the freed black folks that the immigration system was created to gain access to citizenship and to be able to vote. And so that is coming full circle, right? When an immigrant is able to become a citizen, it's the legacy of the whole history of this country that is fulfilled. And so it's a wonderful moment, right, to make sure that that right is given and it's exercised by the individual that becomes a United States citizen. The last thing I will say is you all may wonder, how do you pronounce the name of the organization? We often say Tahirih, like hooray. And so oftentimes during our galas, the audience even says Tahirih. But it's not to minimize the meaning of Tahirih, because Tahirih is an Arabic word that means the pure. And it was a title given to a heroine, a Middle Eastern heroine, particularly Iranian heroine, who in the 1800s challenged the male-dominated environment by removing her veil. And at the time, removing your veil is like what's considered now the hijab type, like the head cover, the head scarf. And at the time was actually covering the face as well. And it was considered almost like prostitution. So it was an incredible gesture of rudeness and going against the male-dominated society. And she chose to remove her veil in an effort to push forward the emancipation of women and push for the equality between the genders. And she even stated in that act, she said, "You can kill me as soon as you wish, but you will not stop the emancipation of women." Unfortunately, she was martyred because of that act. She was indeed killed because of that act, but that is the name that inspires the organization. So thank you so much.
Okay, I'm going to go over to this corner. Can I use this mic? Is it okay? Hello, can you hear me? Yes, all right, wonderful. I too am an attorney, and I'm very used to standing up in court for many years and standing at a table, so I'm not going to be going up and down because we weren't allowed to do that. All right, well, this is such a pleasure to be with you today. Thank you for inviting me. It's wonderful to see your radiant faces. As my colleagues have spoken before me, I've had the pleasure of looking out and kind of looking at your reactions and gauging, trying to get a sense of who you are, kind of feel you. So the topic is how we were asked to focus on how our individual work impacts and empowers women. I want to start by saying that, and I'm talking really to the young people here, the thing that I've found most useful in life and that led me to make some little impact where each really drops in an ocean. The first step is to identify what your mission is in life. If you can do that, that is the launching pad for success. Now, when I speak about a mission, I don't mean figure out what your career is going to be. See, this is the mistake we make. This is the confusion. You've got to look and see what your unique talents are, what your passions are, and then think about what lines of action you can take. So maybe over a course of a lifetime, if you know what your mission is, you can take that mission and have 10 different careers. It's not the career that matters. Let me give you an example. My self-identified mission is to act as a catalyst for transformation of two groups of people. One is individual transformation. So I come to you and I see if I can offer light and receive light from you. That's one form of transformation. The second is community or societal transformation. So you see, I've crafted the term mission in very broad terms. Now this gives me a lot of scope to use this as a launching pad to do what I'm going to do. I've ended up wearing two hats. So over the years, I was a lawyer. That was my career for 20 years. After a while, I put that aside. Currently, I wear two hats, both of which I use to catalyze transformation. So let me start with the first one. The first hat I wear is as the founding director of this thing called the Center for Peace and Global Governance. Basically, what I've done is try to come up with new, innovative ideas for how we can solve global challenges. Like what? Like climate change, like the threat of nuclear war, like border conflicts, like genocide. Yes, all the big questions that women really shouldn't be involved in. Why did I go into this work? Because I firmly believe that world peace will not be possible until women are involved in decision making and have seats at the table in all spheres of life, from the sublime to the ridiculous. So we need women physicists and nuclear scientists and doctors and lawyers and politicians. I didn't want to be the woman who talked about, please give me my rights. I wanted to be the woman who broke through the barrier and invaded, if you like, the male bastions, the traditional male bastions. And that's actually what I ended up doing. I didn't know that I'd be successful, but I was pretty determined. I studied international law. I worked at a couple of firms. For a while, I had my own law firm doing something completely different. I studied international law. I ended up having my law firm doing family law for a few years. And then I had my daughter, and I decided to quit the law after 20 years of practice and set up the Center for Peace and Global Governance, because I looked at the world and saw it falling apart at the seams. I'd been working at the State Department. I realized that our solutions within government were very reactive. There's so many crises. We're constantly putting out fires, but nobody seems to have the time to think proactively and see, well, where are we all headed? Where's this train going? What are the crises that are coming down the pike, and what can we do to avoid them? So as I did this work, I started writing books, I started lecturing, I started traveling around the world, I started teaching online courses, and then during the pandemic, I realized that people were really depressed. I don't know if you've been around anyone who's depressed, but you can give them like the best roadmap, but they're just paralyzed. There's no motivation, there's lethargy, there's apathy. So I thought, what can I do to actually create motivation in people? And that's when I wrote my latest book, The Alchemy of Peace: 6 essential shifts in the way we think and perceive and interpret reality, which then leads to a shift in habits. By virtue of the work that I did, I ended up empowering other women. So I didn't set out to think, as Anusce would say, from a position of privilege, oh, I am going to empower you. But by engaging and identifying my own distinctive capabilities and applying them in service, I was able to shine my own light in the world. And we each are a light. We get in our own ways. That's a beautiful quote from Marianne Williamson, that our greatest fear is not that our darkness, but that our light, we're afraid to shine our light. And who are we? I agree, it's freezing in here. I've been freezing this whole time. Who are we? And then she says, if you allow yourself to be the highest expression of who you are, you then unwittingly give permission to others to say, hey, if she can do it, I can do it. I think this is what the mayor was trying to say when her mother said, if I can do it, you can do it, right? It's a form of empowerment, saying, yes, you can. So the concept of empowerment, I had the same instinct as Anusce before me to kind of think of the definition of empowerment. I'd like to offer one. It comes from a man, but hey, we have to be seekers of the truth no matter what body it comes in, right? So this wonderful American entrepreneur said that leadership and empowerment consist in the ability to change another person's thoughts, beliefs, and actions for the better. I can't think of a better definition. And it starts with myself. If I can change my own thoughts, beliefs, and actions for the better, and that means moving 1 millimeter from where I was yesterday. Doesn't mean that I aim for the stars and then beat myself up because there's always a gap between where I am and the stars, which is what women do a lot. But to say, hey, focus on the gain. Where was I yesterday? Where am I today? So that is one definition of empowerment. The second thing is the purpose of empowerment. I think this is where this is even more important, is to create the environment and the conditions in which you and I and all of us can actualize our potential. So you see, you don't need somebody to give you a label. You don't actually have to run for office to be a leader. If we can learn to shift our thoughts, beliefs, and actions for the better, we unwittingly allow others to follow in our footsteps. And if you can help somebody else shift their thoughts, beliefs, and actions for the better, you are already a leader. So I know Dahlia wants women to run for office, and I believe it's very important because women do need to be at the table and making decisions. And so, yes, we need to have at least 50% of those in decision-making positions be women. But in addition, if you feel you can't run for office, you can still be a leader. My perennial struggle has been getting involved in areas like global governance. 20 years ago, my best male friend said, Sovaida, why are you doing this? It's a waste of time. Nobody's interested in global governance. Those same guys about 5 years ago decided to jump on the bandwagon. And you know what they did? They pretend like I don't exist. We get on panels together, they won't even say hello to me. These are friends, people I've known for 40 years. We're not talking about acquaintances because they feel threatened because I beat them to the punch in their minds. This is all about competition as opposed to collaboration. And it's a turf thing. They want to be there first. They want to be the ones heard. And they're now trying to kind of push me out of this space. I just find that really fascinating. I think it's such an interesting sociological phenomenon to watch. I'm not fazed by it, but I must say, sometimes I look at them and I think, really, guys, really? You know, the world is falling apart at the seams, and you're here trying to kind of take over this little bit of territory to say you wrote this book and, you know, you were the first to come up with all these ideas. It's silly. So, but this is what you have to be ready to contend with. The impact of the work I do. So we talked about empowerment. CPGG helps make the world a safer place. So how? For example, I've proposed an idea of how the world can come up with a new system of collective security that would avert wars like the ones in Ukraine, where so many people are getting decimated, especially the women and children. Another proposal about how we can globally pool key resources energy resources so that we're not fighting over energy, so that one country can't hold oil and gas or anything else hostage and the rest of us have to kowtow to them or threaten us with nuclear weapons. So solving this trifecta of the nuclear challenge, equitable distribution of energy, and climate change. These are all proposals that CPGG, the Center for Peace and Global Governance, has made that will improve and are improving when put into practice the lives of women everywhere. The other thing that the impact where it's helped women is by identifying principles that are essentially the foundations for any new infrastructure of governance that we want to build. See, here's the problem. We have built all our community organizations, political, environmental, economic, failing to take into account a fundamental law of society. You know how gravity is a law of physics? You and I can choose to say, I don't believe in gravity. Sure, we can do that. I can believe whatever I want. But it'd be pretty dumb to try and build an airplane not taking gravity into account. Yet we have blithely gone about building all kinds of institutions, failing to take account the law of the oneness of humanity. And now we're wondering why all our systems are collapsing and crashing around our ears. Every single system in this country, in every other country in the entire world, is collapsing because we tried to build this airplane, this society, without taking into account this law. So one of the things we do at CPGG is identify a set of foundational principles and demonstrate how we can operationalize them, how we weave them into the very infrastructure of our society to create systems that actually work for all of us in all our beautiful diversity. The second hat, I will take 2 minutes to describe this to you. I am also a life mastery coach. This is where I do my work in individual, helping catalyze individual transformation. And I work with women in particular. My goal is to help remove the internal blocks that stop us women from attaining that amazing light that is ours, of being the highest expression of who we are. I give the analogy of a garden. You know when you want to plant seeds and the weeds keep strangling the flowers? What you want to do is identify the weeds and pull them. Well, we all have pre-recorded, basically, tapes in our head, limiting beliefs, false assumptions, the little critical voice. You want to be able to identify those and pull them up and get rid of them. Then whatever actions you take, whatever seeds you sow in your life will take. The garden of your life will blossom. But those are very insidious weeds, and it often takes somebody else who is more detached than we are about our own lives and our own history and our own experiences, in our own interpretation of what it means to be an immigrant and what it means to have grown up without privilege or with privilege, or to have been white or black or brown or yellow, or whatever the story is that we tell ourselves or that we allow society to tell us. So the impact of the work I do in my coaching is to release women from the shackles imposed on them by these limiting beliefs and to help them identify their unique abilities. Because remember, I started at the beginning by saying, first, the secret to success, I believe, and this is just a humble opinion, is to be able to identify your own mission in life with clarity. And part of that work is to identify our unique abilities and then see how we can leverage them in service to humanity and in service of our own growth. So 2 things, growth and contribution, are the goals. Well, that's it. Those are the 2 hats I wear today that I wanted to share with you. I'm delighted to see some young women here. The future is really, the future of the world rests in your hands. And you will do this in partnership with the young men in the group who will support you and enable you and allow you to channel and release your own energies. Thank you very much for your patience.
So I believe we have a couple of minutes for Q&A. Is that correct? Yes, we have about 5 minutes for Q&A. So do we have any questions for our panelists? Yes.
My name is Monica Ozarzik. I work for a small company here in Vienna called Sarah Set. We focus on brain health and work a lot with a lot of trauma survivors, releasing them from the stuck nervous system. I have a question about the men that we have talked about a lot. I was in the military and came from a very male-dominated career field. I've had wonderful experience with the men, have had a lot of freedom. And I was wondering, what have you found effective in helping men not feel being affronted by the, there's a lot of criticism of men, and I've had really good experience with men, and I was just wondering what some of your advice might be to help men, to kind of meet us halfway sometimes. When you have had trouble, like with the turf stuff.
So honestly, I find our best bet is to start with them when they're very young. So the faith community that I happen to be involved with has what we call a junior youth empowerment program, and that is for kids between the age of 11 and 14, and they get to practice the principles of equality and respect and recognizing. I think. So this is just obviously a very personal belief. I think the foundational idea that I have found helps more than anything else is to ask the question, does the soul, assuming that you believe that human beings have a soul, does the soul have a gender or not? And I tell my male friends, and some of them are atheists and agnostics, it really doesn't matter because you're in conversation with people. I say, imagine what if, 1% chance, okay, what if there is a life after this, so my soul continues to progress, and you get to the other side and you suddenly realize that all these distinctions that we had on planet Earth, man, woman, whatever, anything in between, black, white, tall, short, were irrelevant, that ultimately it's just our qualities of character that matter. What then? How, looking back over your life, how well would you feel that you had spent your life? And how has it served you now that you're on the other side? I think these are the thought-provoking questions that we all need to be asking ourselves, regardless of what the answer is that you come up with, and different people will espouse different conclusions. I'm just trying to get them to think. And I've found with my male friends who have been willing to start thinking that all of a sudden that shift starts to occur. For shifts to occur, you've got to shock people. You can't just, being nice has not done it for me. Being combative has not done it for me. Standing up for myself and saying, hey, I understand you're feeling threatened, but here are my boundaries. So you see, learning to set boundaries is really important. You may not be able to change them, but at least you won't get squelched. So you've got to figure out what your goal is here. You're trying to shift them? Are you just trying to get on with your own business of shining your light? What are you trying to do here? So different suggestions depending on what the goal is.
So I think in my experience and mine, I love problem solving and trying to find every practical solution. And I was dealing with this earlier today. And coming from a family of two older brothers, the big thing, and I still remember, and sometimes you can start young, which is great. When I was teaching, I was leading the student council, and it was an 8-year-old boy. We were having a leadership retreat, and he answered the question of what does it take to be a leader? And he said, listening. And so the big thing, and generalizing, women tend to be a little bit better listeners. For whatever reasons, there's many, but so much of that, combating that, and everyone has a different way of doing it, and sometimes it takes longer. But I think standing there and ensuring that that listening's happening, and for me, it's always easier to do it as an advocate for someone else than for myself. But even if it's just stopping someone and say, let her finish, and ensuring that people actually listened to what was said. I found that to be, so far, the best way to do that.
Excellent. Do we have time for one more question? One more question. So yes, go ahead.
Thank you so much. This was really wonderful hearing all your inspirational stories, trailblazing in a lot of ways. My question is something that's come up a lot for my generation of female leaders is this idea that being a woman is like the minimum, like it's enough in a way that makes us think that as long as we have, women in positions of power, it doesn't really matter what they're doing with that power, kind of like the identity politics conversation of it all. And I found that really hard because as I really want to see, a new generation of 50% plus women taking over the world, there's a lot of great characteristics of that. And at the same time, I struggle when we don't kind of push our peers who are women to really think in a nuanced way about what the world we envision that truly is inclusive and recognizing our own privilege. And I just wonder, how if that's been a challenge for any of you, if you've witnessed that kind of that struggle between identity in one position, but then neglecting a whole nother side of inclusivity and justice. So, yeah.
You are presenting us with a very loaded question, and one that I don't think that can be answered in like a few minutes, but I'll start with something that may not feel connected to what you're saying, but I promise I have a point. One of the biggest lessons that I have learned from one of my closest friends who is a Black woman who allowed me to ask her a lot of difficult questions was when she checked me and said, just remember that because you're nice does not mean that you're not part of the problem. And that put a lot of things in perspective because you can be a woman in a leadership position, but still be part of the problem. If you're carrying behind you the privileges that you've been given and also operate and continue to support an oppressive system. If everybody around you looks like you, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. Yes, it's a wonderful work that you're doing, but are you actually empowering, speaking about empowerment, other voices? And that is the biggest struggle because we almost take the helm, for a mission and what our individual mission may be, and we do create competition. And that is, in my opinion, unnecessary and does not have a space. And one of the biggest challenges for any of us is truly to take a pause back and a step back and look around and see, am I actually harming? Am I perpetrating even more harm by pushing forward narratives that are part of an oppressive narrative? And I think that's the first step. We cannot talk about reparation, we cannot talk about change if we don't stop and acknowledge the mistakes that we're making and have made and learn from those mistakes so that to create new structures. And I don't think it's possible to do that without inviting the diverging opinions. It's easy to collaborate when everybody thinks the same. It's much harder to collaborate when the person across from you does not agree. But the fruit of that consultation is more powerful. So I think that's where one of the reflections that I would offer.
Another round of applause. They were amazing.
Thank you all so much for being here tonight. We'll look forward to seeing you at Town of Vienna events in the future.